Welcome to Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protocol. We're talking about a lot of things in this show while we chew the gum. And as always, on each and every show, we always have
something for your mind, something for your mind, something for your mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 것 필요합니까?
something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요.
something for your
Welcome back to this edition of Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z, and we chew the gum while doing it. Some folks say you shouldn't talk and chew gum, but here we beg to differ. We think it's okay to chew gum and talk. It gives you a little rhythm, it helps you to concentrate, and if a little fresh breath is a side effect, then that's okay as well. Today I have as my guest Deborah Miniman. Deborah is a substance abuse counselor, and also she has some certifications that we're going to share, and I dare not try to remember it because I don't want to butcher it. But Deborah is a substance abuse counselor doing some great things for our society, and we're glad that she's here today to share her experiences and her insights on how life was before and after COVID-19 and what that means for us during this process. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So I was saying that there's a certification attached to your name, and it's CARES is the acronym. Please explain to us what that's about.
Yes, a CARES is a Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialist, and that is issued by the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse in Atlanta. And so to qualify for that, you have to be a person in long-term recovery themselves, which I am for 8 years. And then you apply by sharing your experience, strength, and hope in you write it down in a story, you send it to them, your story, and then they accept you. And once they accept you, then you go in for their 40-hour class and you become certified. And that really is doing, the peer work is doing some amazing advances in substance abuse right now. So I actually have been at CARES for 3 years, and I worked in the field as a CARES, and then I became certified as a substance abuse counselor after the fact because I wanted to further my education. So that's kind of where I am right now. I can work in either realm, really. I can work in peer or I can work in clinical. But it's a really it's a funny boundary, so you really have to watch boundaries on that because, of course, as a substance abuse counselor, you don't share your experience, strength, and hope with the client, but in the peer realm of it, you do. So the boundaries are really thin.
Oh, I see. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you for your transition and your decision to take that route. That is to be applauded. So I applaud you for that. And it's interesting. Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And again, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. I think it's an interesting story that a lot of people will find helpful. The other thing was you talked about the balance between the peers aspect and the clinical aspect. And I just wonder, because individuals who are going through situations like this, a lot of times there are very personal stories that are shared, and I can understand in a peer setting, the reciprocation of stories is a helpful thing. And I just wonder about in the clinical setting, how difficult or are there certain tactics that you stay aware of so that you don't cross the line in sharing those personal experiences and expectations? How do you go about that?
Ethics. You know, really, I have to. I'm very ethical, and I really have to follow the ethical, you know, values and responsibilities as a substance abuse counselor. And with that being said, you know, you can share a bit and piece of your story with somebody or your experience with a client, but you only do it if that is the last resort, and you know that you're not getting through to the client and you want them to succeed. And sometimes it is a very powerful way to get through to the client, but in most settings you just don't open up and share your experience. You know, in my situation, I have a lot of experiences in my life, so I relate to a lot of different people, and sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. That's kind of why I like to do the peer work as well, you know, because I can totally share and provide hope. And it's all about, right, you know, becoming a hope dealer today and not a dope dealer, you know? So
right.
That's what I call myself today. I'm a hope dealer. So
no, I get that.
Yeah.
I could imagine, you know, in a lot of fields, and in particular when someone has, if they're a captive audience, for example, in my realm of teaching, I have a captive audience. My students have to be there. You know, sometimes if it's in a substance abuse situation, if it's court ordered, that person has to be there via a court order. And sometimes, you know, you hear people say, well, you know, how can you help me? You don't know me. You don't know my life. You don't have these experiences. And just as in
Right.
teaching, I think folks that have lots of life experiences, it makes them a better coach or a better teacher. And I just, I could just imagine that some individuals you work with outside of the peer sessions might, you know, sometimes have that idea that, you know, that you or other counselors can't relate to them, but you definitely can because of your experiences. How have your experiences been so that it helps you to relate to the clients?
Well, you know, I always tell people that you cannot look at somebody and tell what they've been through ever. And not only that, but everybody is going through something. So you have to understand that. So for me, you know, drug addiction and alcoholism has been a part of my life since I was about 15 years old. My mother was alcoholic, and so it was well accepted in my life and in my family's life, and it made it easy for me to, you know, escape from my feelings and everything. Because living with an alcoholic, you know, mother, the family's so dysfunctional, and there's not a whole lot of healthy communication. So there's always looking, you know, I was always looking for an escape, and so my escape was to drink and, you know, to smoke pot. And from there, they say it's not a gateway drug, but I'm here to tell you that it is, because for me, it led to, you know, a lot of other substances. My next addiction after that was cocaine, and that really took a big effect on my family life with my husband and my children. But then, you know, the next phase of it, I turned to prescription drugs. And so Xanax became my drug of choice. And that really destroyed my second marriage. And, you know, then after that fact, I got sober, I got clean. And, you know, I was actually facing 15 years in prison because in a blackout on the Xanax, I almost killed my husband. And that was a really difficult time in my life, but because I was court ordered to treatment, I got clean and sober. And that worked for a short time, and we got divorced, and I got off on the charges. And I met my third husband, and we got married. And 3 weeks into that marriage, I woke up and found him dead next to me. He had overdosed on opiates.
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So, you know, he was a disabled veteran. And 3.5 weeks, it was about 2.5 weeks into our marriage, we went on a trip. We bought a new car. We were in a car accident on the way back. And it hurt him really bad to the point where they ended up putting him in ICU with internal bleeding. And the doctors came in. They didn't know that he was a recovering heroin addict, which, you know, the opiates are a big deal right now.
Right.
And they put him on methadone for pain, and they sent him home with 80 pills. And, you know, a week later, he overdosed on them because he would keep them in his pocket. I didn't know he had them. He would just keep on taking them. And, you know, methadone doesn't work like heroin does. You don't get the high that they get on heroin. So if they are taking methadone, they are trying to look for that same high that
increase the dosage and
Yes, right. And you know, actually, the coroner told me, you know, when he pronounced him deceased, when he pronounced him dead, the coroner told me that one of the symptoms of methadone, if they are taking it by themselves and nobody is giving it to them, they forget how many they take.
Mm-hmm.
So he took 60 out of 80 in a week.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, but, you know, following that, I just kind of went crazy. You know, I didn't know what to do. Didn't want to go back on Xanax. But I found methamphetamines.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, crystal meth became a big part of my life, and that actually led me to become homeless. And I lost my home. I lost everything that I owned. I lost the relationship with my kids. I lost everything that I ever knew so I could chase that drug. And I did that for 6 years, and they didn't know if I was dead or alive. I never called and contacted them and told them I was okay. That mess really had me just in I mean, I was chained. You know, I was shackled. I couldn't get released from that drug.
Mm-hmm.
And then in April of 2012, I made a decision that I choose life, and I was done. And I ended up being able to walk away from it with nothing except for my car. I did have my car, but everything that was of value was gone. And I went to detox. And from detox in 10 days, then I went to a treatment center, and I was in a long-term treatment center for homeless women that are addicted to drugs. And I remained there in treatment for a year, and then they put me in their supportive housing, and I was there for an additional 3 years. While I was there, I got breast cancer, but I also went to college. I signed up for college and never been to college before, and I got my bachelor's degree. I graduated with that last year, and now I'm in my master's.
Well,
So,
that's great. That's really great.
Yeah. So, you know, I've got a lot of experience, life experience, and now I have the book, you know, the educational experience behind me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's sometimes when you are helping a client in a clinical capacity, it can be difficult not to say, hey, I get that. I've been there.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
No, but like you said, you have ethics, and then in your training teaches you what to say and where to go. It's again, that's a very, it's a story that's common, and it'd be great if more people were able to come out on the other end in the fashion that you were, and to be able to pursue it from a different angle like you're doing now. Was there something in particular in April, would you say of 2012?
Yeah, it was actually on Easter Day.
Uh-huh.
And so that's funny because Easter this year fell on the 12th.
How about that?
So that was exactly 8 years earlier. Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah.
and you were just kind of done, and you were able to have the whereabouts to say, you know, I really want to change, or I need to change, and made that
Well,
happen.
it wasn't really that cut and dry because, you know, previous to that, you know, I mean, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 57. I'll be 58 next month. But this was right before I was turning 50, and I had gotten busted with a meth pipe, and that was actually my first possession charge. And that kind of gave me that wake-up call. And they put me on pretrial release until my case came up in court, and they would tell me and give me 4 weeks notice as to when I had to go in and drug test. And I couldn't stay clean long enough to go in there and drug test clean.
Even with
So
4 weeks notice.
I knew, yeah, but you know, I was also selling drugs too at this point because that was my income. And you know, that's when they had all of the pill mills around, and I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Oh, I'm very familiar with those, but just for our audience, go ahead and give a bit of an explanation of what that is.
Okay, so what we call a pill mill is you make an appointment with this doctor's office. You go in there, you pay $200. You tell them that you have this problem, that problem, the other problem, and they give you 2 prescriptions when you leave. They give you, well, for me, they gave me 1 prescription for 125 OxyContin, and they gave me another prescription for 90 Percocet, 90 Xanax, and 90 Somas.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this was right before the epidemic started happening. And every month on the 7th of the month, I went in there and I walked out of there with a prescription for 550 pills. And, you know, those were hot on the street. And,
Right.
And, you know, I would make $2,000-$3,000 within hours.
Sure.
Yeah, and so that's how I was making my money. And so on top of getting that drug charge for the possession of the meth pipe, I was also, you know, having to move around from place to place, you know, hotel room to hotel room every month to sell my pills. And so I would get robbed all the time. And the final straw was I came to one day. I didn't wake up. I came to where somebody had roofied me. They had put some drugs into a coffee I was drinking, knocked me out, and they robbed me. And when I came to, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know anything about what had happened. I couldn't even remember where I couldn't remember anything, nothing. And that's when I made the decision. When I realized where I was, I said, that's it. I'm done. I can do this. And you know, and for me, my higher power, you know, God really got me out of that. And so I wasn't a spiritual person, but I clearly heard a voice say, come on, choose life. I'm with you. You can do this. Mm-hmm. And I got up and I was able to walk away from it. And I never looked back. I never looked back.
That is outstanding, and I'm so happy for you. And you know, I wish that, and I hope my listeners, and I don't know if any of my listeners are in similar situations, but it's almost like all of us know someone in our family or extended family or friend network that are in situations like that. And so just being able to hear a story like that, you know, it gives hope. You know, I have had quite a few individuals in my life who were in situations almost exact to what you've described. And some of them have been able to transcend that and to find their way out, and others did not. And some of them are, either imprisoned or no longer here. So again, I just applaud you. Just a quick reminder, you're listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z while we chew the gum. You can find this podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Feel free to send us an email at letschewthegum@gmail.com or at protocol@gmail.com. That's PROTKALL. If you'd like to be a supporter of the show, feel free to visit us on Anchor, our home station, one of our home stations, at www.anchor.fm/protocol, where you can find all of our previous episodes, including this one, and where you can also make a donation. We're so happy to have today our guest, Deborah Miniman, substance abuse counselor, and she's been so graciously sharing with us her intimate details of her story and her past as someone who had issues with substance abuse, and she's been able to transcend now to be someone that helps. So now she's, as she said, dealing hope and not dealing dope. So Deborah, as you were able to transcend and not look back, describe a little bit of the process. How did the process of going through the programs help you and to strengthen you and to solidify you as someone that wanted to be a counselor for this? How did that process help you?
Well, I think I was at that point where either I was going to prison or I was going to die. And so with that being said, at the point I was at, I made a decision within my mind that I was going to do whatever I was told to do, because my way didn't work. I tried my way, and my way didn't work, and whatever somebody else that was a professional told me to do, I was willing to do. And so that's the mindset that I had going into treatment. And when I walked in there, I was extremely humble, and I was ready to, like I said, just do whatever they told me to do, and that's what I did. And so I was able, and it wasn't easy. When I was detoxing off of the drugs, that can take up to 2 years to come off of meth to get your brain functioning properly. And so for me, the amount of meth that I did every day was a struggle coming off of it. And I was sick for probably about 6 months. I think the counselors had bets on me that I wasn't going to make it, but I was very strong-willed, and I really wanted to do something with my life, and I didn't know what, and I didn't know how. And so I had to give up everything. I had to give up when they say people, places, and things, at the different 12-step meetings and stuff, where you have to give up all people, places, and things. And that's what I did. And I rebuilt a network of healthy people. I would sit in the front every time we would do a group. I would sit in the front whenever they took us to a 12-step meeting. I would sit in the front when they took us to church. And by doing that, I was able to listen to other people. And when I heard somebody say something that I wanted, and I don't mean, financially or materialistically, but when I hear somebody say, I've got 12 years sober and this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing it, I want to know. And I want to know you. And so with that being said, my network is just huge, massive. Network has everything to do with, changing your life.
Absolutely.
You have to have a big support system. And trust me, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Anybody. It's just going to take some. They say that drug addiction, you don't use willpower, but you use willpower to make the choice.
Right.
You have to be very strong-willed to make that choice and that decision that you are not going back to it.
Yeah, you definitely have to want it. That's important.
Yeah, and that's how I got through it. That is really how I got through it. And life isn't easy now, especially with the COVID-19. There's one of our biggest problems as people that were addicted to drugs and alcohol is isolation. And so now we're told we have to isolate. And so, but that's probably something that we could talk about at another time, because, I mean, there's so many different ways now to stay connected, to get connected. A lot of people that don't have the motivation to get up and go to a meeting, they don't have to do that anymore. They can pick up their phones and they can bring up Zoom and they can pull up a social media such as, like Facebook, and they could see all the Zoom meetings that are posted, and they could just get on one and they don't even have to participate. They can just listen. And so, again, that takes a willingness to want to do that. But now's the perfect opportunity for that. It really is.
Let's talk about that. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. And when we come back, hopefully Deborah will stick with us and we'll be able to talk about substance abuse during the COVID-19 and what are some ways that you can still get help and not allow this virus to enable the substance abuse issues that many people suffer from. We'll be right back.
Something for your mind.
Please mind the gap.
Something for your mind.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it could be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast also with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thank you for listening to our sponsors. We're back with our guest, Deborah Miniman, substance abuse counselor. She's been sharing her experiences with us as someone who suffered from substance abuse and someone who now is helping to get others and to save others who are in that same situation. Before the break, Deborah, we were talking about substance abuse during the COVID-19. And while some people may not use it, but why it may cause some others to suffer because of the fact that they can't get the supports or the fact that the COVID-19 brings upon stressful situations that may cause others to turn to substances. You were just speaking about the opportunities that individuals have with technology to still be able to get the help that they need, right?
That's right. And first off, let me say this, there's a lot of relapse going on. There's a lot of using going on, behind closed doors. So just let me say this. If you are looking for help and you need detox, there are detox centers that are open. They have not closed the detox centers. You just have to know, where to call. And, you could do that by going to SAMHSA, which is the government website. It's SAHMSA. And if you pull up SAMHSA.gov, it will give you listings of treatment centers all over the country and the world. And it will also give you a list of detox centers in your area that you can call. So that's important to know. And there's also a lot of resources on social media, such as Facebook. And I use Facebook because that is where all the connections are. There's a lot of groups on Facebook that have inside information that you might not know about. So, for example, I am close to Atlanta, so we've got an Atlanta recovery group. And if you, just Google or just type in, recovery group, and then whatever city you're in, put that first and recovery group, it's going to pull up a whole bunch of different Facebook pages that you could connect with. And also there's something that we have here in Georgia. It's called the Warm Line, and that was created by the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. But it is an 800 number, and I don't think that it works out of state. But I am sure that if you look up peer support in your state, if you Google that, it's going to give you different phone numbers. And I will absolutely double check with the Georgia Council and see if they have access to any of the other peer support in any other state. Because the Warm Line, you would call. It's open 7 days a week. And, yeah, it's not 24 hours, but I think it's open until 11 o'clock at night from about 8 o'clock in the morning. And you can call, and it's confidential, and you could talk about what you're going through. And they will help you with referrals to wherever, or they'll just listen. They'll just listen. Sometimes that's all we need is for somebody to listen.
Absolutely. I find that sometimes when you have issues and you just need someone to listen, oftentimes they don't necessarily have to say anything back, but it helps you to draw conclusions because you're expressing. You're not just having a conversation or holding it in your head. And so that's important also, just for someone to listen. It's a great help. Really quick, the website you gave, is it SHAMSA, S as in Sam, H as in Harry, AMSA?
It's S-A, let me see. I think it's, let me look. Hang on just a minute. I'll look it up.
No worries. While you're looking that up, I just wanted to make sure so people could find it. I wasn't sure if you had SAMSA or SHAMSA, but the idea that these opportunities with technology are available, I hope people are able to take advantage of it because, in this situation where there's social isolation, it's easy to feel alone. And you hear that everything's closing down, and the fact that you're saying, hey, these centers are open still, that's a great help because this is a stressful time, and lots of people are stressed out and losing family members and losing life as we know it, and that could be definitely a trigger that we don't want people to have to go through.
That's right. It's SAMHSA.gov.
There you go. SAMA.
Yes, HSA.
Okay.
.gov. And when you pull it up, you'll see it says rehab and addiction treatment. That's the first one that comes up. So yeah, you click on that and navigate through. It's really easy. That they may have made that navigation very easy as far as a resource that will help. And definitely we'll find something locally, or if not locally, within the state that you live,
Absolutely.
So you can get some help. Yeah. No,
that's a big help because, again, as I said, if you don't know the help is there, it's hard to find it. And so I'm glad you're here to be a resource for our listeners and for individuals who are listening that know someone else that needs the service, and then definitely for what you're doing in your area. And so now you've had these experiences and you've been able to come back from them, and you are received your bachelor's last year, and you're working on your master's to continue to help individuals, and you have your cares. What is your?
And I also have.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
BCT.
Say that one more time.
So I'm certified. I'm certified through the Georgia Addiction and Drug Certification Board of Georgia. I call them Abacadabra because
Right.
that's kind of what the letters are. But I'm certified through them as a certified addiction counselor level 2, and for that I had to accumulate 2,000 hours, work hours, and I had to accumulate my bachelor's degree. I had to complete that, and I also had to do some supervision hours as well. So I actually got accepted and sat for the exam in February, right before all of this happened, and I passed the exam. So I became certified right as the virus was starting to affect the world.
Right.
You know, but as far as that goes, that's a big deal to me. I've been working on that for the last 4 years.
No,
so.
that's great, and just everything you have added to your list, the credentials, all those are big deals to me. I'm just really so very happy to have met you and to be able to share your story, because a lot of people who suffer, again, it's difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's difficult for people to believe that not only that they can remove themselves from that environment, but that they can have a productive and meaningful lifestyle afterwards. And you've shown that, and you're doing that. So that is very, motivational. And so that's, again, why I'm really so glad to be able to share your story here with our listeners.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you so much having me share my story. It's really important for me to share, because, everybody's going through something, and it doesn't matter if it's a drug or alcohol or gambling or sex or whatever your addiction is. There's help. There's help out there.
Right.
And and you can change. You can change, and it is not easy, but it is worth it.
No,
life is definitely worth it.
Definitely it is. It's like I say to individuals who, I've worked with individuals with substance abuse issues or just all types of issues. And, the one thing I tell them is you have to, be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. And, don't beat yourself up about it. The fact is it took some time to get into the situation. So expect that it's going to take some time to be out of it. And, you're a living testament to, something I share with my high school students and just people in general. And I always have them to, forgive yourself for a lot of things, because it's okay to have a problem. A lot of us have problems. I always say it's okay to have a problem. It's not okay to know you have that problem and not do something about it. Sometimes it's difficult and you want to do something about it. And that's the start. You want to do something. You may fall back, you may backslide, but ultimately you're making progress towards it. So doing something about the problem is great.
Right. And that's where the counseling comes in. That's where professional counseling comes in, because everybody suffers from trauma. And especially drug addiction and alcoholic, trauma is the biggest trigger that there is. And chances are that you suffered trauma, and that's when your addiction or your alcoholism took off. And so dealing with that, dealing with the grief, the trauma, the forgiveness, especially learning how to forgive yourself first, because you can't forgive anybody else until you forgive yourself. And it's not an easy process. It takes work, but if you have the time and you're willing to do it, all the help that you have out there, there's so much help available for that. But you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. There's a lot of trauma out there. I've suffered from a lot of trauma. I'm recovering from, mental health as well as addiction. So there's a lot to be said for counseling, definitely.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
not a weakness. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that it's not a weakness, because oftentimes people feel like, if I seek counseling or if I have to ask for help, that somehow that's a weakness. And I tell them, no, that's a strength when you can admit it, when you can be humble enough and when you show humility, that's a strength. It takes strength to be humble. It takes strength to admit faults. And so, I like to applaud folks who do that and let them know, no, that's a strength. It's okay. Even folks I encounter when I don't know that they're going through something, I just always assume, like you said, everyone's going through trauma of some sort. So it's my assumption when I have an audience that I'm letting them know that, it's a strength. Again, it's okay to have a problem, not okay to not do something. If you need help, seek it. That's the strength. That says a lot about your character because, you know, like in my classes, I tell students, you know, it's okay if you don't know everything, because if you knew everything, why would you be in class? Why would you be in school? We're here because we don't know everything. So don't be ashamed at what you don't know. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. So I'm glad you shared that. People need to know that it is a strength.
Yeah. Be vulnerable. You know, that's the biggest thing is be vulnerable, and it's okay.
There you go. And as you know, we have to do our part to help to create those environments where people are willing and feel okay to be vulnerable, because so often they've come from environments where, you know, if I'm vulnerable, someone's going to take advantage of me. If I'm vulnerable, I'm weak. If I'm vulnerable, you know, I'm going to be, you know, punked or whatever it may be. And so, you know, just like in my classrooms, you know, we established day one that this is a safe place for everyone. I don't care who you are. Yeah. This is a safe place. And in our schools and in our society and our justice systems, people need to understand and feel with all legitimacy and reality that, you know, there are safe spaces where you can go. And that's so important.
Yes. And, you know, today there's over 25 million people in recovery. So now is the safest time for people to come forward. There's more help now than ever.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah. You know, and I know that, you know, in some ways the United States is not on the back burner or the last, but, you know, there have been many countries before that have moved to components to where they take an approach to treatment as opposed to prosecution. You know, for many years, and in some instances still, it's been about prosecuting, arresting people, labeling people, taking away their livelihoods because now they're tagged with felonies and whatnot, as opposed to people receiving treatment. And then people's perception of, you know, drug use as a criminal activity, or is it an illness, you know, abuse or addiction as an illness. And so the transition that we've been going through, as you said, now it's one of the more safer times in our history to where, you know, people are showing empathy to individuals and being sympathetic to what they're going through to provide help as opposed to prosecution. So again, another message that needs to get out there.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, just to encourage people. So I did get that possession charge, but I had first offenders because I had never had any others. And so with first offenders, I successfully completed all of the stipulations of my probation, but that was back in 2011, and so I had just gotten my records expunged and sealed about 3 weeks ago, so I have no record on there.
That must be a great feeling.
It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling, and so that's another thing today is that the criminal justice system is starting to acknowledge that, you know, people with addiction don't need to be in jail.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, that's great. That's sort of my philosophy. You know, people talk about discipline in other ways with the home, you know, whether your kids are in trouble or not. And I've always said I've never gotten a kid, even in schools, you're never in trouble or it's gonna have some type of punitive situation going on. If you do something and you made a mistake and you didn't know, you know, that's an opportunity for correction and education. Now, if you're doing something and you know that you did it wrong and you receive some correction before and you continually do it, you know, that's different. But, you know, addictions are sensitive issues and people don't know the trauma that you've been through. They don't know the situation. So, you know, it's high time that we change that perception. And like you said, it's changing. I'm so glad that I had a chance to have you on the show today, Deborah. And for our listeners, again, this is Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. And today's discussion has been about substance abuse and changes in life. Reach out to us. We'd love to have you folks on the show as guests or to submit questions for our guests and follow-up sessions. You can reach us at letschewthegum@gmail.com. Look for us on all social media platforms, wherever podcasts can be heard. We appreciate you joining us. And Deborah, before we go, I just want to give you an opportunity. If there's a last call to action or last thing you'd like to share with our guests, I want to leave that open for you right now.
Okay. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you allowing me to share my experience, strength, and hope a bit. But I want everybody to know that whatever you're going through is temporary. Okay? Everything changes. Everything changes. And, look at this time of quarantine, or if you're on the front lines, take it with a grain of salt, number one. Number two, look at it as an opportunity for whatever it is that you have always wanted to do. If you're staying home, now is the time for you to put your foot forward and to take action on it, because you may never have this opportunity again. And so with that being said, I hope and pray that everybody stays safe and healthy. And thank you so much for being here and listening.
Indeed. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for choosing life. Thank you to our audience members for listening in. Please get this information out to anyone that you know is in need of help. And if you have questions or comments, follow-ups, email us at the show, and we'll be sure to forward them to Deborah. This has been Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. And as always, we have
Something for your